The shuttle was small compared to the massive alien station that floated in the darkness of space. Daniel Carter pressed his face close to the window and watched as the station grew larger and larger. It was beautiful in a strange way. Lights of many colors blinked along its surface. Ships of all shapes and sizes moved around it like tiny fish around a whale. "Are you nervous?" Lisa Morgan asked from the seat beside him. Daniel turned to look at his co-diplomat. She was younger than him, but smart and brave. He trusted her completely. "A little," he admitted. "This is the first time humans have ever met the Galactic Conclave. Everything we do today will be remembered forever." Lisa nodded slowly. "No pressure, then," she said with a small smile. The shuttle docked with a soft bump. The doors opened, and Daniel stepped out into a world unlike anything he had ever seen. The air smelled different, sweet and strange. The walls were made of some kind of metal that seemed to glow from within, and everywhere he looked, there were aliens. Some were tall and thin with long necks and large eyes. Others were short and round with many arms. Some walked on two legs like humans. Others crawled or floated. Daniel had studied pictures and videos of these species for months, but seeing them in person was something else entirely. A creature that looked like a cross between a spider and a mantis approached them. It wore a silver robe and carried a staff that hummed with energy. "Welcome to the Galactic Conclave," it said. Its voice was high and clicking. "I am Coordinator Vexus. I will take you to the assembly chamber." Daniel and Lisa followed the creature through long hallways. Other aliens stopped to stare at them. Some whispered to each other. Daniel heard words like primitive and young species and interesting. He kept his face calm and professional, but inside he felt a mix of excitement and worry. The assembly chamber was enormous. It was shaped like a bowl, with seats rising up in circles all around a central platform. Thousands of aliens filled those seats. The noise of their conversations was like the sound of a great storm coordinator. Vexus led them to a small section near the bottom. "These are your seats," it said. "The summit will begin shortly," and it walked away without another word. Daniel sat down and looked around. He tried to identify the different species. There were the Norith, tall and graceful with skin like polished silver. There were the Thren, small and furry with quick movements. And there, on the opposite side of the chamber, were the Valori. The Valori were terrifying. They looked like giant insects standing upright. Their bodies were covered in hard shells of black and red. Their eyes were dark and cold. And at the front of their section sat the largest Valor of all. This was High Commander Thrixel, leader of the Valori military. A loud tone rang through the chamber, and everyone fell silent. A being of pure light appeared on the central platform. It was an AI Daniel knew, created long ago to manage the Conclave's affairs. "The summit is now in session," the AI announced. "First matter of business. The Valori Empire has announced its intention to annex the Keller system." Daniel felt his stomach tighten. He had read about the Kaleri. They were gentle creatures who lived in the oceans of their world. They had no weapons, no armies, no way to defend themselves. High Commander Thrixel rose from his seat. His voice was deep and harsh. "The Keller system holds valuable resources. The Kaleri are primitive and weak. They cannot make use of what they have. We will take it and use it properly." Many in the chamber nodded in agreement. This was how things worked in the galaxy, Daniel realized. The strong took from the weak. It had always been this way, but it did not have to stay this way. Daniel stood up. His heart was beating fast, but his voice was steady. "I wish to speak." The chamber fell silent. All eyes turned to the small human. Thrixel made a sound that might have been a laugh. "The new species wishes to speak," he said. "How amusing. Let it speak, then. Perhaps it will entertain us." Daniel walked to the central platform. He looked up at the thousands of faces watching him. He took a deep breath. "My name is Daniel Carter. I am an ambassador from Earth. We are new to this galaxy, and we have much to learn. But there is one thing we already know. What you are planning to do is wrong." Murmurs rippled through the chamber. Thrixel's eyes narrowed. Daniel continued. "The Kaleri have done nothing to threaten anyone. They are peaceful. They are innocent, and you want to take their homes simply because you can. We have seen this before on our world. We know where it leads. It leads to suffering. It leads to death. It leads to endless war. He paused and looked directly at Thrixel. Humanity warns you. Do not do this. If you attack the Kalari, there will be consequences. For a moment, there was silence. Then Thrixel began to laugh. It was a horrible sound, like rocks grinding together. Other aliens joined in. The laughter spread through the chamber like a wave. The consequences? Thrixel said. From you? You are nothing. Your species is young and weak. You have a handful of ships. We have thousands. What could you possibly do to us? Daniel did not flinch. We are giving you a warning. That is all. What you do with it is your choice. Lisa met him as he returned to his seat. That was brave, she whispered. Also, maybe a little crazy. Daniel sat down and watched as the conclave voted to allow the Valori to proceed with their annexation. Not a single species opposed it. The Kalari had been abandoned. They will learn, Daniel said quietly. One way or another, they will learn. No. 3 months passed after the summit. On Earth, life continued as normal. People went to work. Children went to school. The news talked about sports and weather and politics. Most humans had already forgotten about the strange aliens far away in space. But Admiral Kevin Brooks had not forgotten. He sat in his office at the United Earth Military Command and stared at the screen in front of him. The images were hard to watch. They showed a beautiful blue planet covered in oceans, and they showed the Valori fleet descending upon it like a swarm of locusts. The Kalari had no chance. Their cities were built beneath the waves, great structures of coral and glass. The Valori weapons turned those cities to rubble. Millions of gentle creatures died in the first hours. Those who survived were rounded up and put to work in mining camps. Kevin had seen war before. He had fought in the Mars conflicts 20 years ago. He had watched good soldiers die. But this was different. This was not a war. This was a slaughter. His assistant knocked on the door. Sir, the council is ready for you. Kevin stood up and straightened his uniform. He was an older man now, his hair gray and his face lined with years of service. But his eyes were still sharp, and his mind was still quick. He gathered the data files and walked to the council chamber. The United Earth Council was made up of representatives from every nation on the planet. They sat in a great circle, their faces serious and worried. Kevin took his place at the center and began his presentation. 3 months ago, our ambassador warned the Galactic Conclave about the Valori invasion, he said. They laughed at us. Now, we have proof of what happened next. He played the recordings. The council members watched in horror as the Valori ships attacked the Keller homeworld. They saw the cities burning. They heard the screams of the dying Kalari. When it was over, the chamber was silent. What are you asking us to do? One of the representatives finally asked. Kevin took a deep breath. I am asking you to authorize military action. I am asking you to send a fleet to the Keller system to stop the Valori and protect what remains of the Kalari people. The chamber erupted in argument. Some representatives shouted that it was not humanity's problem. Others said they could not afford a war with a powerful alien empire. Still others worried about what might happen if they lost. In the middle of the chaos, a man stood up. His name was Nathan Cole, and he was a commander in the Earth Fleet. He was tall and strong, with dark skin and eyes that had seen too much death. May I speak? He asked. The chamber slowly quieted. Nathan walked to the center and looked at each representative in turn. I understand your fear, he said. I've felt it myself. War is terrible. People die. Families are destroyed. I know this better than most. He paused. But I also know something else. I know that there are times when good people must fight, not because they want to, not because they enjoy it, but because the alternative is worse. He pointed at the screen, which still showed the ruins of a Kalari city. Those creatures did nothing wrong. They lived peaceful lives in their ocean homes. They had families and children. They had hopes and dreams. And now most of them are dead, and the rest are slaves. His voice grew stronger. If we do nothing, we become part of the problem. We become the kind of people who watch evil happen and say it is not our concern. Is that who we want to be? Is that the legacy we want to leave for our children? The chamber was completely silent. We warned them, Nathan continued. Ambassador Carter stood before the entire galaxy and told them what would happen. They laughed at us. They called us weak and primitive. Now we have a choice. We can prove them right by doing nothing, or we can prove them wrong. The voting began. It was close. So close that Kevin held his breath as the final votes were counted, and when the result was announced, he felt a wave of relief and pride wash over him, by a margin of just 7 votes. The United Earth Council authorized military action. The next weeks were a blur of activity. Ships were prepared. Crews were assembled. Supplies were loaded. The first expeditionary fleet took shape at the orbital shipyards around. Earth Kevin stood on the bridge of the starship Valor's Edge and watched as the fleet gathered around him. 47 ships in total. It was not a large force by galactic standards. The Valori had hundreds of ships in the Keller system alone, but Kevin had one thing the Valori did not have. He had Captain Emma Walsh. Emma was young for her rank, but she had earned it through skill and intelligence. She had studied every military conflict in human history, from ancient battles with swords and spears to modern wars with missiles and drones. She understood strategy in a way that few others did. The Valori outnumber us 6-1, she said as she reviewed the tactical displays. They have bigger ships, more weapons, and more experience. By all logic, we should lose. But, Kevin asked. Emma smiled. But they have never fought humans before. They do not know how we think. They do not know how we adapt. And most importantly, they do not know how much we are willing to sacrifice for what we believe in. The fleet jumped to faster than light speed. The stars stretched into lines of light and then disappeared entirely. Kevin looked out at the strange void of hyperspace and thought about what lay ahead. 47 ships against 300. It seemed impossible. But humanity had faced impossible odds before, and sometimes, against all logic, they had won. The journey took 2 weeks. When they finally dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Keller system, Kevin felt his heart begin to race. In the distance, he could see the Valori fleet. Hundreds of dark shapes against the stars. And beyond them, the blue world of Keller, now scarred and burning. All ships report ready, he ordered. One by one, the captains confirmed their status. 47 voices, calm and steady. 47 ships ready to fight. Kevin turned to Emma. You know the plan? She nodded. I know it, and I believe it will work. Kevin opened a channel to the entire fleet. This is Admiral Brooks. In a few moments, we will engage the enemy. Some of us may not come back, but what we do here today will be remembered forever. We fight not for glory or conquest. We fight for the innocent. We fight for those who cannot fight for themselves. And we fight to show the galaxy that humanity keeps its promises. He paused and took a deep breath. All ships advance. High Commander Thrixel was in his command center when the alarm sounded. He looked up from his meal with annoyance. His officers scrambled to their stations, their legs clicking against the metal floor. What is it? He demanded. Unknown ships entering the system, High Commander. 47 vessels, coming from Sector 9. No one would dare attack the Velour. The Conclave species knew better. The Velour fleet was too powerful, too experienced, too ruthless. Then he saw the ship designs on the screen, and he began to laugh. "The humans," he said. "The little humans have come to play war." His officers laughed with him. The sound echoed through the command center like the clicking of 1,000 insects. "How delightful," Thrixel continued. "I was getting bored on this primitive world. Now we can have some entertainment. Order the fleet to attack. Destroy them quickly. I want to finish my meal before it gets cold." 300 Velour ships turned toward the human fleet. They moved in a tight formation, confident and aggressive. They had crushed countless enemies before. These tiny human ships would be no different. On the Valor's edge, Admiral Kevin Brooks watched the enemy approach. The Velour were coming straight at them, just as Emma had predicted. They saw the human fleet as easy prey. They were not being careful. That was their first mistake. "All ships, execute pattern Delta," Kevin ordered. The human fleet split apart. Ships scattered in all directions, moving in ways that seemed chaotic and random. The Velour watched with confusion. This was not how battles were supposed to work. Enemies were supposed to stand and fight, not run like frightened animals. They flee. One of the Velour officers shouted, "Pursue them." The Velour fleet broke formation to chase the scattered human ships. Each Velour captain wanted the glory of destroying an enemy vessel. They did not notice that they were spreading out. They did not notice that the gaps between their ships were growing wider. "Lieutenant?" Chris Taylor gripped the controls of his strike fighter. He was part of a small squadron hidden behind a nearby asteroid. Through his cockpit window, he could see the Velour fleet passing by. They were so focused on chasing the other human ships that they had not noticed him. "All fighters, this is Taylor. Target the command relays. Hit them hard and hit them fast." 20 strike fighters shot out from behind the asteroid. They were tiny compared to the massive Velour warships, but they were fast, incredibly fast. They wove between the enemy vessels, too quick to be targeted. Chris found his target, a large antenna array on the side of a Velour cruiser. He pressed the trigger and felt his fighter shake as the missiles launched. The antenna exploded in a ball of fire. All around him, other fighters were doing the same. Within minutes, the Velour fleet's communication network was in ruins. Ships could no longer coordinate with each other. Captains shouted orders that no one could hear. The organized fleet became a confused mob. Thrixel slammed his fist against his command console. "What is happening? Why can I not reach my captains? The communication relays have been destroyed. Hi, Commander. We are blind." For the first time in many years, Thrixel felt something cold in his chest. It was fear. He pushed it down and forced himself to think. "All ships, fall back to defensive positions. Form a circle around the planet." But his orders could not reach the fleet. The Velour ships continued to chase the human vessels, each one alone and confused, and then the trap closed. The scattered human ships suddenly stopped running. They turned and attacked, all at the same time. But they did not attack randomly. Each group targeted a different section of the Velour fleet. They hit the edges first, where the ships were most isolated. Kevin watched from the Valor's edge as the battle unfolded. Emma stood beside him, calling out orders with calm precision. She had studied this tactic in old Earth history books. It was called defeat in detail. You split your enemy apart and destroyed them piece by piece. "Focus fire on the cruiser at Mark 7, Emma ordered. "Ignore the fighters. Take out the big ships first." Human weapons were different from anything the Velour had faced before. They were designed by a species that had spent its entire history fighting itself. Every weapon was built to be efficient and deadly. Every shot was calculated for maximum damage. A Velour battleship exploded. Then another. Then 3 more. The humans were taking losses too, but for every human ship that fell, 5 Velour ships were destroyed. Chris Taylor flew through the chaos, his fighter dancing between explosions and debris. His squadron had been reduced to 12, then 8, then 5, but they kept fighting. They targeted engines and weapon systems. They made the big ships vulnerable for the main fleet to finish off. 6 hours. The battle lasted 6 hours. When it was finally over, the remains of 112 Valori ships drifted through space. The rest of the fleet had fled to the far side of the planet, too damaged and scared to continue. Kevin slumped in his chair. He was exhausted. Around him, his crew cheered and hugged each other. They had lost 11 ships and hundreds of good people. But they had one. Against all odds, they had one. Thrixel stood alone in his command center. Most of his officers were dead. His flagship was damaged and barely functional. Through the window, he could see the burning wreckage of his fleet. "How?" he whispered. "How is this possible?" He had laughed at the humans. He had called them weak and primitive. He had been so certain of his victory that he had not bothered to study their tactics or their weapons. Now he understood his mistake. The humans were not like other species. They were not content to follow the rules of galactic warfare. They had their own rules, written in blood over thousands of years, and those rules were very effective. A message came through on the emergency channel. It was Admiral Brooks, High Commander Thrixel. "This is the human fleet. Your forces have been defeated. You will withdraw from the system immediately, or we will destroy every remaining ship you have. You have 1 hour to decide." Thrixel stared at the screen for a long moment. Part of him wanted to fight to the death. But he was not stupid. He knew when he was beaten. "All ships," he ordered through the emergency channel. "Prepare for retreat." As his damaged fleet limped away from Keller, Thrixel made a silent promise to himself. This was not over. The humans had won today, but there would be other days. He would have his revenge. But deep in his heart, beneath the anger and the shame, the fear remained. The humans had done the impossible, and that meant they might do it again. The news spread across the galaxy like fire through dry grass. In every system, on every world, beings of all species heard the same incredible story. The humans had won. 47 ships had defeated 300 at first. Many did not believe it. The Valori were one of the most powerful military forces in the galaxy. They had conquered dozens of worlds. They had never lost a major battle. Surely the reports were exaggerated. But then the videos arrived. Recordings from Valori survivors. Images of human ships moving with deadly precision. Footage of Valori warships exploding one after another. The evidence was undeniable. In the halls of the Galactic Conclave, the mood had changed completely. 3 months ago, the species had laughed at humanity. Now they spoke in whispers. They looked over their shoulders. They wondered if they had made a terrible mistake. The Valori representatives demanded action. They called for the entire conclave to unite against humanity. They warned that if the humans were not stopped now, it would become a threat to everyone. But the other species were not so sure. The Norith, with their long necks and silver skin, argued that humanity had only acted in defense of the innocent. The Thren, small and quick, pointed out that the Valori had started this conflict by ignoring human warnings. Even the usually silent Corvin, ancient beings of living stone, said that perhaps the conclave should listen to what the humans had to say. And so, for the second time, Ambassador Daniel Carter walked into the Great Assembly Chamber. The difference was remarkable. 3 months ago, aliens had barely glanced at him. Now every eye in the chamber followed his movements. No one laughed. No one whispered jokes. There was only silence and careful attention. Daniel took his place on the central platform. He looked up at the thousands of faces watching him. He could see fear in some of those faces, anger in others, and in a few, something that might have been respect. "I stand before you today, not as a conqueror," he began. "I stand before you as a messenger. Humanity did not want this war. We did not seek it out. We did not plan it. But when we saw innocent lives being destroyed, we could not stand by and do nothing." He paused and let his words sink in. You look at us and you see a young species. You think we are primitive because we have only traveled the stars for a few centuries? But our history is older than you know. For thousands of years, humans have fought each other. We have waged wars over land, over resources, over ideas, over nothing at all. Every generation of our species has known conflict. His voice grew stronger. We are not proud of this. War is terrible. It destroys families. It kills children. It leaves scars that never heal. We have learned these lessons in the hardest way possible. He looked directly at the Velori section. High Commander Thrixel was not there. He had been recalled to the Velori homeworld in disgrace. But other Velori watched Daniel with hatred in their eyes. But because we have fought so much, we have also learned how to fight. We have developed war into a science. We have created weapons and tactics that no other species has ever imagined. This is not a boast. It is a warning. The chamber was completely silent. Humanity offers you a choice today. We can be your friends, or we can be your enemies. If you choose friendship, we will protect you. We will trade with you. We will share our knowledge and learn from yours. We will stand beside you against any threat. He paused. But if you choose to be our enemies, you will face the full power of a species that has spent its entire existence preparing for war. And I promise you, that is not something any of you want. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then, slowly, the North ambassador rose from her seat. The North accepts humanity's offer of friendship, she said. One by one, other species followed. The Thren, the Corvin, the Silene, the Drava. Within an hour, 8 of the 12 conclave species had declared their intention to ally with. Humanity, the Velori delegation, stormed out of the chamber without a word. Far away. On the surface of Keller, Commander Nathan Cole led his soldiers through the ruins of a Kaleri city. The Velori occupation forces had fled when news of the fleet's defeat arrived. Now the humans were working to help the survivors. The Kaleri were strange and beautiful creatures. They had soft blue skin and large dark eyes. Their bodies were built for swimming with long fins and webbed hands. They moved slowly on land, but in the water they were graceful and fast. Most of them were injured or sick. The Velori had worked them hard in the mining camps. Many had died from exhaustion and starvation. Those who remained were thin and weak. Nathan's soldiers distributed food and medicine. They set up shelters and water purifiers. They worked without rest, doing everything they could to help. A young Kalari child approached one of the soldiers. Her name was Amanda Price, and she was barely 20 years old. The child looked up at her with wide, curious eyes. "Why did you come?" the child asked. Its voice was soft and musical. "Why did you help us?" Amanda knelt down so she could look the child in the eyes. She thought about the question for a moment. There were many answers she could give. Political answers about alliances and strategy. Military answers about proving human strength. Diplomatic answers about galactic relations. But in the end, she gave the only answer that really mattered. Someone had to, she said simply. The child did not fully understand. It was too young to know about war and politics and the complicated affairs of grown-ups. But it understood kindness. It understood that these strange creatures from the stars had come to help when no one else would. The child reached out and touched Amanda's hand. Its skin was cool and smooth. "Thank you," it whispered. Amanda felt tears forming in her eyes. This was why they had fought. This was why good soldiers had died. Not for glory or power, but for moments like this. For the chance to make a difference, she squeezed the child's hand gently. "You are welcome," she said. Across the ruined city, human soldiers continued their work. They pulled survivors from collapsed buildings. They treated the sick and wounded. They buried the dead with respect and honor. And slowly, very slowly, the Kaleri began to hope again. 1 year had passed since the Battle of Keller. The galaxy had changed in ways that no one could have predicted. The Velori Empire, once feared and powerful, had crumbled. Without their reputation of invincibility, other species they had conquered began to resist. Rebellions broke out on a dozen worlds. The Velori military weakened and demoralized, could not fight on so many fronts at once. In the end, they had no choice but to negotiate. A treaty was signed with Earth, promising that the Valori would never again attack peaceful species without cause. High Commander Thrixel, once the most feared warrior in the galaxy, was arrested and put on trial for his crimes against the Kalari Admiral. Kevin Brooks stood at the window of his office on Earth's orbital station. He was looking at the new fleet being constructed in the shipyards below. Hundreds of ships, larger and more advanced than anything humanity had built before. They were not weapons of conquest. They were tools of protection. A knock came at his door. "Come in," he said. Captain Emma Walsh entered. But she was not a captain anymore. She wore the uniform of an admiral now, with stars on her shoulders and a new confidence in her step. "You wanted to see me, sir?" she asked. Kevin smiled and turned away from the window. "I did. I have some news for you." He picked up a document from his desk. "Effective immediately, I am retiring from active duty. The council has accepted my resignation." Emma's eyes widened. "Retiring? But sir, you are the hero of Keller. The fleet needs you." "The fleet needs new leadership," Kevin said gently. "I am old, Emma. I have given my life to the military. Now it is time for someone younger to take over." He held out the document. "Someone like you?" Emma took the paper and read it. Her hands trembled slightly. "This says I am being promoted to Fleet Admiral. I will be in command of the entire Earth fleet." "That is correct." Kevin put a hand on her shoulder. "You earned this, Emma. Your tactics at Keller saved thousands of lives. Your mind is sharper than anyone I have ever met. The fleet will be in good hands with you." Emma did not know what to say. She had dreamed of this moment, but now that it was here, she felt the weight of responsibility settling on her shoulders. So many lives would depend on her decisions. So many people would look to her for guidance. "I will do my best, sir," she finally said. "I know you will." Kevin smiled warmly. "Now, if you will excuse me, I have a retirement party to attend. Apparently my wife has been planning it for months." On Earth, Ambassador Daniel Carter stood before the United Nations. The great assembly hall was filled with representatives from every nation. Cameras broadcast his words to billions of people around the world. "1 year ago, we took a step into the unknown," he said. "We joined a galaxy that did not want us. We faced enemies who laughed at us, and we proved that humanity is not to be underestimated." He paused and looked out at the faces before him. "But this is only the beginning. The galaxy is vast and full of dangers. There are other empires like the Valori, other tyrants who prey on the weak. Our work is far from finished." His voice grew stronger. "I believe that humanity has a purpose in this galaxy. Not to conquer, not to dominate, but to protect, to stand up for those who cannot stand up for themselves. To show the universe that there is another way." He spread his hands. "This will not be easy. There will be more battles, more sacrifices. More good people will give their lives for what is right. But I believe in us. I believe that we are capable of greatness." The assembly hall erupted in applause. People stood and cheered. Some had tears in their eyes. Daniel felt a wave of emotion wash over him. For the first time in his life, he truly believed that the future was bright in the Keller system. A new monument stood on a hill overlooking the largest surviving Kalari city. It was made of white stone, carved with the names of every human soldier who had died during the liberation. At the base was an inscription, translated into 100 different languages. "They came from the stars, not to rule, but to save." Commander Nathan Cole stood before the monument, with his head bowed. Beside him were the surviving members of his unit. They had come back to Keller for the 1-year anniversary of the liberation. "I think about them every day," Nathan said quietly. "The ones we lost. They were good people. Good soldiers. They deserve to go home."
Ow.
Amanda Price nodded. She was older now, harder in some ways. War did that to people. But she still remembered the Kalari child who had thanked her. She still carried that moment in her heart. "Ollie did not die for nothing," she said. "Look at this world. Look at what we built here." Nathan looked. The Kalari were rebuilding their cities. Human engineers and Kalari architects worked side by side. Children played in the streets, laughing and splashing in pools of water. Life was returning to a world that had nearly been destroyed. "You're right," Nathan said. "They did not die for nothing." Far away, in a prison cell on a neutral world, High Commander Thrixel sat alone in the darkness. His trial had ended weeks ago. He had been found guilty of war crimes and sentenced to life imprisonment. He thought about the moment in the conclave chamber when he had laughed at the human ambassador. It seemed like a lifetime ago. He had been so confident then, so certain of his power. Now he had nothing. His empire was broken. His fleet was scattered. His name was spoken as a curse across the galaxy. A guard appeared at the door. "You have a visitor," the guard said. Thrixel looked up. To his surprise, it was Ambassador Daniel Carter who walked into the cell. "Come to gloat?" Thrixel asked bitterly. Daniel shook his head. "No. I came to ask you something." Sat down on the small bench across from the prisoner. "When I warned you at the summit, why did you laugh? Why did you not take me seriously?" Thrixel was silent for a long moment. "Because I had never lost," he finally said. "Because I could not imagine losing. You were small and weak. How could you possibly threaten me?" Daniel nodded slowly. "That is what I thought," stood up and walked to the door. Then he paused and looked back. "For what it is worth, I did not want this. I wished you had listened. I wished none of this had happened." Thrixel made a sound that might have been a laugh. "And yet, here we are," as Daniel said. "Here we are." He left the cell without another word. Thrixel sat alone in the darkness, thinking about the small human who had changed everything. In the end, the lesson was simple. When humanity made a promise, they kept it. When humanity gave a warning, they meant it. The galaxy had learned this truth the hard way, and they would never forget it.